Hi, everybody. This is Alexandra, and I'm going solo today because Dotsy's speaking at the Animal Rights Conference in Luxembourg. So thank you, Dotsy, for spreading the good word, and so glad she'll be back next week. But meanwhile, I am really looking forward to talking to our guest today because we're going to be discussing the mind-body connection. And I know that for me, my body manifests a lot of what is going on in my mind that I don't want to look at. And the first time that I remember was when I was 15, because I'm sure it happened before then, but I didn't realize it. But when I was 15, I got really sick. I had a lot of abdominal pain. The whites of my eyes turned yellow. I had to be quarantined at the boarding school I was in. And then I went into the hospital and they saw that my liver was having a lot of problems. So they decided to operate on me. And back then it was the 70s. So they opened me up, no laparoscopy from sternum to belly button, and discovered that I had a blockage in my bile duct. And it was a 13-hour surgery. And the surgeon afterwards told me that I had been born with this configuration in my bile duct that was kind of odd, but it had never been a problem until now. And my surgeon believed it was because I was reacting to my parents' divorce. I wanted them to get back together, so I got sick. And I scoffed at that, by the way, because I thought, I don't want my mother and father to be back together. They were super unhappy. I never dealt with those feelings around the divorce. And lo and behold, a year later, I became anorexic. And then for the next decade, I was bulimic, binging and purging. And, I think an eating disorder is a really clear example of how emotions can affect the body. And the one thing that I definitely learned through therapy, because I finally did examine my pain around my childhood, and this is why I believe I haven't binged and purged for 32 years, because I did examine it, is that when I'm allowing myself to feel feelings, I am too full to binge because I'm full of feelings. So there's no this craving, this feeling that I just have to fill up. But when I'm avoiding uncomfortable feelings, I would get these huge cravings to eat because I literally wanted to stuff down that discomfort, that avoidance, cover it up with huge amounts of food. And I remember many years later, my twin, Caroline, she was getting over at the same time our father's death and a breakup of an 11-year relationship. And so she lost a ton of weight. And I asked her if I should be worried about her. And she said, and I'm quoting, because I'll never forget it, I thought it was really apt. She said, "Alexandra, you don't have to worry. This is just an outer manifestation of my inner pain." And of course, we knew what her inner pain was, the death of our dad and her breakup. And eventually, of course, she's now back to a beautiful, perfect weight. But I think that we would all do well to look at our aches and our illnesses and our digestive issues and our body discomfort and how we're changing our body through food as a manifestation of something going on deeper inside us. And we need to get curious about what's going on emotionally instead of just treating the body like the physicians normally do. And that's why I'm excited about talking to our guest today. So let me get to her and introduce her to you. And don't forget that you can always leave questions or comments about our shows at switch4good.org/podcast, and then just scroll down and you will see an orange button where you can record your question. And now let's get on with the show.
So what if for every ailment or pain or disease we're having, it's really just a cry for something in us to be seen, loved, acknowledged, and received? That's when healing happens.
An emergency room can be stressful, a place where doctors treat patients rapidly and with limited resources, often putting themselves at risk in the process. But for one ER doctor, a clear pattern emerged from the chaos and a new calling was born. Our guest today is physician, author, and founder of the American Institute of Mind-Body Medicine, Dr. Kim D'Eramo. Dr. D'Eramo started her career in emergency medicine. There, she observed that many patients with chronic illness had a mental and emotional component that kept them in their disease. After being diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder herself, she was forced to confront the shortcomings of the medical world that she knew so well. She embarked on a healing journey and now dedicates her career to sharing the power of mind-body medicine on her YouTube channel and in her book, The Mind-Body Toolkit. Dr. D'Eramo empowers us to heal and get happy by tapping into our body's inherent wisdom. I am very excited to explore the principles of mind-body medicine with Dr. D'Eramo and to learn how to achieve true health. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This will be really exciting.
I mentioned it several times in the intro, but can you explain to us what the concept of mind-body medicine is?
Yes, mind-body medicine is the understanding that the mind and body are connected and that the body has the ability to heal itself. And also the awareness that our consciousness affects our bodily function, our physiology, and that it's sort of all intercommunicating and connected.
And being an emergency room doctor, you really don't have the time to deal with the mind and the interaction with the body with your patients. So what was the awakening experience that you had that I mentioned in the intro that got you interested in this kind of healing?
That happened way before I went into medicine and actually was my inspiration to become a doctor. I had always been very intuitive, and that had kind of heightened in my teens where I could know what people were thinking, hear their thoughts, feel their emotions, but not as like a separate thing outside of me. It was like a very integrated experience. I knew it wasn't my thoughts, but I could have those, awarenesses as if it was my own thoughts, my own feelings of what was going on for a person. And, I really begin to see most people had no idea. It wasn't like they were lying to me to say, no, I'm not thinking that. I'm not feeling that. That's not what's going on. They actually didn't know. And most people were so shut down to this inner awareness. So I sort of had to learn, what do I do with this? There's so much more to the picture. I had awareness of why disease is really happening and how it's the tip of the iceberg of what's really going on in the system, suppressing the energy and, clamping the body down, clamping the health down, overrunning the body, creating inflammation, and then manifesting at the surface level as these symptoms or these diseases. But I had no idea, how will I help people see at this level where I see? So I had a really strong awareness that I was here to become a physician and to share this from that standpoint. So, later on in my career in the ER, I knew I had already known where I'm ultimately going and that this was a part of that. So I did my best to keep that awareness, to keep it alive, and to share the insights I would have, because there were a lot of people that came to the ER who didn't really have like a true emergency. And I would do my best to share, do you want some insight onto what's really going on with this Crohn's disease or abdominal pain, or what's really going on with your chronic headaches or your, autoimmune disease, or fill in the blank. And most people were very open to that and absolutely wanted some greater insight. And I would start just sharing basic things that I was aware of, and the tears would stream and people would cry. And you're 100% right. This is exactly how I feel. This is exactly what I've done. And sometimes really specific things about their past, it's easy to see when you start to let that level of information in, when someone's carrying trauma, or when they are in an abusive relationship, or maybe someone who hates their body and is in that battling themselves kind of thing. These patterns, you might seem very strange for someone to think how could you know this? You just met me. But when you begin to tune in, the awareness is very, very clear. So even in the ER, I was letting that in on some level, but I just knew, okay, ultimately we need a different structure for my practice, because this is going to eat me alive. And I want to be in a practice that's more supportive and conducive to this work that I'm here to do.
So when a patient comes to you, or perhaps it was someone in the ER, how would you approach them versus a regular doctor? So give me an example of what, if someone, choose the illness and then tell me how you would help them.
Okay, so at the point I'm at now, there's a lot of structures in place where it's really easy for me to be in that receptive space, and people are coming to me for this. So there's a lot more that can happen. So one of the things I'll do is simply have them share about what are the biggest challenges. So there's one woman that had severe MS, and she couldn't walk anymore. She was in a wheelchair, and we'll just tune into those physical things, right? Like, this is happening in my legs, or she had to be in a bed in her living room. They had to like rearrange the house because she was so debilitated. So there's like this specific mental, circumstantial stuff. Then there's, what are your feelings about that? There was a lot of fear. There's a lot of a sense of failure for this particular person. Like, somehow I didn't overcome this. I didn't beat this, especially because she understood some of mind body medicine. So she thought like, I should be able to heal this. So there was this like sense of failure. There was also a lot of anger and resentment she held to other like family members, and saw herself as a victim. And that's really what came up with the illness and the symptoms, is she felt so victimized. Like, there's nothing I can do. This keeps getting worse. I'm helpless. I'm powerless. And so you start to see what's embedded in the system, a sense of helplessness, a sense of powerlessness. These emotions, or the thoughts we have about ourselves, are like automatic programs playing in the system. I can't do it. I can't, I'm not enough. Then there's like a heaviness and a burden. Those are all cellular messages. That's our brain chemistry. That's our hormones. That's our physiology. That's inflammation that kind of keeps us in the battle. So inflammation exacerbates and the body shuts down further, and all of those physiologic processes creating ill health are just, exacerbated. So the progression of the disease is really just the body mirroring this inner world and this inner belief system. So once, and the person has to be ready. They have to be curious enough, open enough. Are you ready to allow this to change? Everybody isn't there. So not everybody's ready for this work, right? Like, sometimes we got to percolate in that state enough till we're like, I'm ready to give up everything I think I am and just surrender and forgive it and let something happen, which she was. So she was willing to like embrace a lot more compassion for herself, for the experiences she had had way back that had her sort of buy into this powerlessness and battle her way through life, and everything that created that physiology. And once we unwind the patterns, the body can heal sometimes really quickly.
So what kind of changes did she see? Do you know?
So she began walking again. She got out of the wheelchair. They got the bed out of her living room, and she was in her regular bed again with her husband, and she was able to begin walking again.
And this was because you uncovered her habit of choosing victim over what was it that really helped her? I can definitely see how what you did was different from the average doctor who would have just looked at the physical symptoms.
Yeah, it wasn't really what I did. It was that she was willing to let go of identifying as the powerless victim. She was ready to let go and surrender the fight and let in that power, that, creative power, the life force that courses through us. See, when we clamp down into fight or flight, working hard, oh no, and we clamp down in that persona who's so scared, it shuts down our life force. And so it could be a cancer. It could be ulcerative colitis. It could be Hashimoto's. It could be Lyme disease. It could be, make the biggest list you want to make of how that will then manifest as disease. But the antidote, the opening, could be one thing. It can all be exactly the same thing. In fact, most patients who find my work have like 20 diagnoses. And they're not separate things happening. It's one clamp down. It's one massive resistance so that the body is not doing that regeneration that it was designed to do. And so once we open, and I like to think of like the path of Like, what's the greatest point of resistance you're holding? Because there may be like a bunch of different things in there, but like, what's the one that's sucking up the most amount of your life force? Because when we unwind that one thing, you're going to get all that power back. And usually it doesn't take a huge amount for the body to begin to do what it needs to do to heal. So I'll often look for like, what's the biggest nugget that if you could let go of that one thing, that one perspective, that one belief, that one trauma that's still locked in your body and you're still kind of, suppressing that emotion, that if we could unwind that one thing, you would have freedom. And we start there, and it's pretty miraculous what happens.
Do different diseases link with different traumas or personalities?
I would say different diseases link with different closure patterns. So for Lyme disease, it's almost universally someone who's like, I'm going to battle this. I'm not going to let this get me down. I'm going to fight this. Chronic fatigue syndrome, same thing. They've had a pattern of, battling, fighter. I'm not going to let this shut me down. For like Candida, overgrowth of Candida, and you try all the diets in the world and you still got this Candida. Is a lot of that, like, oh, I'm just so burdened by life. It's so heavy. I've tried so hard and nothing has worked. And the defeat. So there's a sense of powerlessness and defeat. So I've definitely seen, Hashimoto's is a little similar to that, the Lyme disease, where they're going to achieve, they're going to learn, they're going to try. So there's like a holding pattern in the body. So I do see some generalities. And it really isn't necessarily worth studying that, because we can all have a sense of interconnection and open to a little deeper listening and have the awareness. Sometimes when I'll meet with someone, they'll know right away in the first few minutes, like, this is exactly what it is. Even if the cancer has been there for like 20 years or whatever the pattern is with chronic fatigue syndrome, or Epstein-Barr virus has been there for like 5 years, they will know just within moments sometimes of like, we nailed it. This is the exact thing. And then they'll have memories they didn't have before. Like, oh my gosh, you know what? Right before this happened, blah, 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 blah. And that memory will come flooding back, and they'll remember that closure, and they'll remember that tension and stress. But until that opening point, these are usually very unconscious patterns.
Something like Lyme disease, though, is a tick that bites you, and then you contract the disease if you don't get antibiotics soon enough.
It's a spirochete. Yeah, it's a particular pathogen that lives in the body. And so then you're not clearing it, right? We got an immune system, and most people clear pathogens that way. Or, sometimes people get diagnosed and they're on 5 courses of antibiotics and nothing will clear it. And it's like years and years, this spirochete, this pathogen's hanging on in the body. And then this one person just can't shake it. Why is this not clearing? Why? Well, you're a good host. When you stay in that fight or flight, that clamping down, your immune system cannot do its job. And antibiotics are not actually the healer. They're there to sort of like clean up 80% of the stuff so that your immune system can do what it's designed to do and get on top of it. So they're there to like support and assist the body in healing itself. If you don't have that supportive strength and life force, all the antibiotics in the world can't really do it for you.
I see. Okay. So I was wondering what comes first, the personality or the disease. So
yeah, and the way I've witnessed it, nothing is coincidence. I had, in fact, my brother many years back was in whatever energy and consciousness he was in, and he got rear-ended by other cars like 9 different times. So you think like, and even he started to think like, is this something I'm doing? Do I have a sign on the back of my car that says slam into me? But we do all carry an energetic imprint. It is a transmission. We are electromagnetic, and that transmission can be detected up to 10 feet away from the physical body. And that transmission actually has things happen in our life or with our relationships or with our health. Nothing is a coincidence. Everything is part of that design and that electromagnetic field. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating when you see these patterns that people have lived that have them become, in that situation eventually that they find themselves.
I think some people might be thinking, well, is she blaming me for my cancer? Is it my fault? Would you say that, or would you say that you're empowering us to let go of that and actually have control over our health?
Yeah, there's a lot of wrongness that gets put on ill health. Like I used to do this to myself, like, oh my God, why did I get sick? I didn't drink enough water. Oh, I shouldn't have eaten that thing. Oh, I shouldn't have had that glass of wine. Like I would destroy myself over being tired. And I realized after years that that's really not what's happening with illness. And so it isn't like it's my fault I was abused or it's my fault I had chronic fatigue ever, because we would never consciously choose any of that. But I can take responsibility. I can take 100% of responsibility for all of the outcomes in my life. And until I'm willing to do that, I won't access the power I could in order to change all of it. So it's really an invitation. And I would invite people to just really soften around where they feel wronged or judged or regretful. Like, well, if I'm that powerful, I should have figured this out years ago. And it's not really true. Now is the moment. It's never before. It's only now when I could begin to take that power back and make a massive change in my life.
You yourself, actually, when you were, where you were in medical school at the time, got sick and had symptoms of headaches and weight gain and fatigue. Tell us about that and how that changed your view of the medical system.
Yeah, that was awful because I was very much in that pattern of like, what am I doing wrong? And I'd studied mind body medicine for a very long time. So I sort of felt responsible and I felt like I should be able to figure this out. But the more I tried, the more complex my illness became. So it was like the reverse effect. And what I eventually found was that it was really only through surrender, because the figuring out and the I've got to do this is part of the clamping down process that created the inflammation in the first place. And it's just sort of doubling down on what's not working. So I needed to sort of, and this is how the healing happened, right? I'd spent over a year with all of the quote unquote best doctors and all the tests and all the studies. And then this one guy had told me, you have XYZ autoimmune disease. You're inflamed to everything we tested. And here's what you need to do. And it was so devastating to me at the time because I thought, you know, sometimes you just want an answer and you're like, finally, someone knows and there's something wrong with me. We could do something about it. But it wasn't actually like that. It was like this no man's land of you're going to be sick forever. You're going to need all these medications. You'll never run again. You'll have to control your environment. So like all my hopes and dreams were going down the toilet. I was a medical student. I can't control my living environment. I'm living in a hospital. And so then I realized, wait a minute, all the doom and gloom. And I thought, wait a minute, what if none of this is true for me? He can have his opinion. Thank you for this. Thank you for your perspective on this. And that's not my truth. And it was that day I really finally surrendered and started listening instead of battling my body. I started receiving in my symptoms, my experience, instead of trying to make it go away. And I let in what my body was trying to tell me. And all it was trying to show me was, Kim, you do not need to fight to make your life work. And I saw all the ways I was like working hard, trying hard, achieving, you know, accomplishing, and all this effort to like not be a failure, or all this ways to avoid this sense of inadequacy, or, you know, all this stuff was always there. So in that moment, I saw it for what it was. And I realized, okay, thank you, body. You're right. I have been doing this, and that's no way to live. And from here forward, I will listen. I'll live surrendered. I will live receptive. So instead of like white knuckling it as if I'm the one who's achieving anything, or I'm the one who's going to heal my body, which you cannot do that. You can only let go so that the life force can come through and do all of those things for you. And it's true for me. I can't imagine how I would have gotten into medical school, like the synchronicities that happened where I found the right place at the right time, or even that day on my interview, like I had such a powerful connection with the interviewer, who I later got to know really, really well. She's like, as soon as I met you, I knew. Boom. There are synchronicities that can happen when we let go. That just won't happen when we're like white knuckling and holding on. So I've just been shown over and over that living with that level of surrender, right? The parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest phase of our physiology and our brain function is really what lets that life force come through. And that's what healed my body so quickly.
So tell us more about surrender, because we know, I think all of us in the modern world know what it is to fight something and go after something and do. I think that when you say surrender, people think that means quote unquote do nothing. Which means, I guess, a lot sitting on the couch. I mean, I don't even know what it is. So help us understand what it means to surrender.
Yeah. Well, this is why it took me so long to let go. And most people with chronic fatigue syndrome do just what I did, which just makes the chronic fatigue so much worse, is you're so afraid that surrender means I'll just melt and like a couch potato on the couch. Surrender means I'll just sit there and do nothing and be overtaken by this disease. And it's such a myth. It's such a falsehood that keeps us doubling down on that fight or flight. And so what I've come to see is that a lot of the things we're holding on to are actually toxic belief systems, toxic patterns, inflamed, persona. And when we let go, which is just, think about it, if you're holding something toxic, all you got to do is relax your hand and the thing drops, right? Like gravity's on your side, life is on your side. It will take it. And we don't even know what we're holding that's like making us sick or causing problems in our life, but we can know like, oh, I'm holding tension. Let me just soften that. When we soften the body, just that one thing alone, and we breathe a little more fully, it restores our physiology to a healthier state. And so that's one really important thing. When we soften and breathe more fully, we go from that sympathetic fight or flight nervous system to the parasympathetic. And now the parasympathetic isn't like nothing's happening. That's actually when a lot of things are happening. All of your digestion, all of your absorption, all of your elimination and detoxification pathways, all of your greatest ideas are going to come when you're in that state. And so just like, you go and work out and then you recover for like a couple of days, the strengthening and like building of muscle doesn't happen from the workout. You have to have a really good, solid recovery. That's where the building happens. That's where the strengthening happens. We're in this like fight or flight. It's meant to be very, very short bursts. And we're meant to mostly reside in the rest and digest. And so it doesn't mean we don't do anything. It just means like you start to pause and get curious. Is what I'm doing coming from my fear, trying to keep itself alive, or is it coming from my truth? Because sometimes I can take one action, it's effortless, that creates like massive expansion in my life. Like maybe it's a phone call or writing something or making a video, or I don't know. But if I'm done it from my inspiration, it's going to touch people really powerfully. It's going to like exponentially expand and create something, versus I could do like 100 things from the fear, like, oh, I got to work harder and like keep trying and get absolutely nowhere. So it really is a matter of trusting that when you let go, amazing things do happen, trusting that you, small self you, doesn't actually have to do anything. When you let go, that higher self, that higher mind comes in. And this is where the body heals. This is where like you create amazing, relationships or work and money, business, all the things that kind of really like fuel the life you really want, a nurturing, loving connection with your child. Those things can't be created from the fight or flight state. So it does take a little bit of trust, because the programming says, like you said, if I stop, nothing will happen. And that's like the big lie that kind of hooks a lot of people into fear.
So what I'm hearing is that you're saying we need to be aware if we are acting out of fear or acting out of authenticity and power, courage, curiosity, I think I heard you say.
Mm-hmm. clarity. So awareness is, for me, that's like the major building block. It's really like a 3-part process. Awareness is the most essential part, and become more present here. If I'm not here, I don't know what the heck is going on here. And most people are sort of living from the neck up. I'm fine. Everything's good. No, what do you mean something's wrong? Nothing's wrong. And your spouse or your friends like, oh, you look a little tense. No, 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 no. It's not that there's not something coming up. It's just you're not aware of it. You've suppressed it. So you got to work really hard to keep doubling down on that suppression, and it gets really exhausting. It costs you a lot of energy. And so it might be a good practice to like soften your shoulders, breathe all the way down to the pelvis, feel and sense what's happening in your body now. When you have soft body, you can't repress your feelings and emotions so well. So they're going to come up, and that's where the breath comes in. The breath can move that energy. Emotions are energy in motion. So when you're breathing more fully, the energy will release and dissolve. And maybe next time someone says, oh, you're okay, you actually just do a little check-in rather than reactively defend.
Is that, you mentioned 3 steps, is that your instant elevation technique?
Yes. Yeah, the instant elevation is the foundation for everything that I've developed in my work for self-healing, for creation and manifesting. That part of, you bring your awareness here, because the body can only live in the now. Your mind can schizophrenically live in all kinds of different la la land fabrications. And once you feel the body and come back to the body and bring your presence to your breath, you bring more power here now, which is the only place it can actually create anything. And the second step is B, breathing. So ABC. So you shift your breathing. When you allow a softer, more relaxed breath, you relax your shoulders, the breath comes more into the belly, like the belly breathing. And so you shift a little by little from the sympathetic, fired, fight or flight state to the parasympathetic relaxation response. And so that's kind of the second step, is just let the breath do the work for you, because it will shift your physiology, not subtly, like so substantially that now you're activating the immune system so it can release that Lyme disease, or, the immune system can recalibrate to let the cancer cells resolve and detox from your system. Like there's so many pathways where healing is happening. And then the third is C, which is your conscious choice. Most of us don't see ourselves choosing that closure over and over and over again. And so if we can become aware and we shift our breathing, we can actually begin to see, okay, wait a minute, I'm closing, I'm clamping down, I'm white knuckling it. I choose to be at ease. So even something as simple as that can have power in our body when we've already done A, bring our awareness here, activate, B, shift the breath, shift our physiology. And then from C, make that conscious choice for what we really do want. And in fact, I can point out in the book, in the Mind Body Toolkit, there are 10 tools you can use anywhere at any time to activate self-healing. And one of them is that. What is it you do want? We put a lot of energy complaining or working on what we don't want. And that is just going to continue the spin out. But when we begin to look at, wait a minute, what I do want is, a partner that picks me up on time and honors my timing, so I feel a sense of well-being, versus like, I can't believe you were late again. How could you do this? We're not going to get anywhere with that. So it's just a powerful way to remember, like, no. How do I consciously choose to create this?
Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want.
I have watched quite a few of your YouTube videos, and I recommend. I think your site is very informative, and you do talk about how, and I think you've seen this in your practice, how few people have taken the time to really ask themselves and answer, what do they want in life? And so it's not only the body, like I want my chronic fatigue to get better, but it's something deeper.
Yes. Yeah. So if this illness, as severe as it may be and scary, were serving a greater awakening for you, and this might not be the best place to start, because sometimes it's like, what? How could this be a gift? But maybe there's like a challenge in your life. How could this be the best thing that ever happened to me? Maybe it's a relationship or job falling away. Maybe it is an illness or getting sick. If you can start with, how could this be a gift? What could this be showing me? If there was something it were showing me, and all that does is create a little bit of receptivity, a little bit of opening. Virtually every single person I've worked with who's come through and very severe diseases sometimes, and then resolve them, has said, I can see how this was the best thing that could have happened to me. I would have never woken up. I would have never been who I am now, living more freely, living more fully. So if you look at, you'd like your knee pain to go away. Yeah, you'd like your energy to come back, but go bigger. If you had all the health in the world, if you had access to infinite possibility and power, what would you create? And what you'll find for most people, right, is once those basic needs are met, it immediately expands into contribution. So I'd have this and this in place for me, and I feel a sense of joy and freedom and serenity, because you want to go underneath the things, right? I want to have my health back. I want to have a nice house. I want to have a partner. But then it's like, what's underneath that? Why? How do you feel? And who do you get to be when those things are in place? That very, very quickly will begin to go into contribution. So I'm living in this joy and this freedom and this sense of serenity. And I do things that invite others into that state as well. We always want to expand because expansion is our nature. So you'll see, if you're willing to do that exercise, and it can take really great courage, cultivate a lot of compassion for yourself, because it has been really hard to go through your journey, especially if you have been very, very sick. It's very scary. So if you start to cultivate that compassion for yourself, for what the journey's been like, you're going to open your heart and see how much love you really have, how deeply you do care. And so if you could invite in all those heart's desires, what would they truly be? And once you begin to let that in and resonate with that, it activates something in your system. That's where the healing happens. Once that opening and that activation takes place, you begin to let in a new intelligence and a new energy and a new state of being.
A lot of people are afraid. I mean, even when you said that, like, what if I could have anything I want? A lot of us are afraid of verbalizing that or accessing that, because we first think, well, I'm never going to get that, so why? And there's so much responsibility for whatever it is that I want, because you're basically inviting in the possibility of being a bigger person, a more involved person. And so all that is so terrifying. Most humans don't go there because they don't want to, really.
Well, it's because they are identifying with the small self. The small self is very scared. The small self is sure, I don't really deserve that. The small self is absolutely positive. I have no idea how that's going to happen. The small self is very programmed to doubt that it's even possible. But thankfully, you're not the small self. You're the I am self. You're the life force. You are the wisdom and the creator consciousness that is moving through what looks like your body and your life. You're not your life. If we took your arm off, would you still be you? If we took your ear off, if we took your leg off, like you realize, all right, I'm not the body. If we took all your degrees away and all your titles and all the people in your life that give you a role, would you still be here? And so you start to see, I'm not the roles I'm living or the names and labels I've been given. So once you let everything peel away, you really do start to see, oh, I am the one watching it all. I'm not my thoughts or emotions, because those change all the time. I am the one witnessing this. Then we start to be the medicine. We start to be the space and consciousness that allows more life to flow into this body and into this life. So I think for most of us, we really do all have something really beautiful written on our heart that we're here to live and experience. And once we let go of the small self that thinks it can't happen, I don't deserve it, we are way more likely to let that come in and to be a better receiver.
You've talked about how important words are and how we talk to ourselves, and you've mentioned it several times in our conversation here. So the quality of your attention is going to create the quality of your result, is what I heard you say once. And I thought that was really intelligent and right to the point. So explain that more.
So sometimes if I'm, let's say, afraid of what might happen, let's say I came on this interview and I have some attachment. I hope she likes me. I hope everybody really gets what I'm saying. And some fear. And maybe I have like something, I want you to go to this link and I want you to do this thing, but I'm like driving it. You're going to feel like the tension of that. It's why people run away in the opposite direction, right? Versus I can be in peace. I can be an invitation. We can't really share anything with anybody when we ourselves are empty. It's like, who wants to follow another busy, overwhelmed person who's super smart and has something for you? In the beginning, it might hook you in, but you soon realize, this is just exhausting me. Because what we really receive from is the embodiment. Someone who has embodied a greater level of peace, someone who has embodied that exactly compassion I was talking about, that's so healing. And so when we show up as the true self, we're not thinking about, what should I say? Oh, maybe if I say this, then they'll think that. We're really just in presence, letting the intelligence come through. So in option A, I would be exhausted after that interview. And in presence, I will be so energized. I am so energized. Like right now, I feel so much joy and gratitude. And I've done a lot of cool things in my day today. So it's like, what a blessed day. I feel amazing. And so it's our embodiment that then transmits through our thoughts, through our words, even our tone of voice, because we don't consciously register someone's fear, but unconsciously you hear it in their voice, you feel it in their electromagnetics. Some people who are watching this are probably energy sensitive and know what I'm talking about. Children especially do that. They know just when to ask you the question they want to ask you, because they can tune into your electromagnetic field. So am I present? Am I here, or am I in my agenda? If I'm here, this moment is effortless. And it's so beautiful. It's so powerful. There's a connection that I could have never tried to create. And that happens when that I am self shows up in the body, soft, breathing here in the moment.
So when you said that, when you first said, I thought that was the what we put our attention on expands. So if we talk to ourselves in a way that, oh, you know what, it's like you said before, you've had patients who've said, it's my fault that I'm sick. I should have worked harder, I should have done this or that. That kind of negative self-talk expands. How can we get out of that mindset? Because I feel I agree with you, and I didn't. You've expanded it to the physical realm because you're a doctor, but it affects everything. If we talk negatively to ourselves, we will bring in negativity in our whole life, and we'll see negativity, and it'll just keep going and going.
A lot of times we're so unaware of that inner conversation, but we see, like you're saying, the outer ramifications of that. Like, why is everyone upset with me? And why is nobody buying my thing? And we don't see where it's coming from. And so through the practice of like the ABC tool, and I have a course for that called the Instant Elevation, where you become adept at being here now, in the seat, in the body, in the power. You become adept at shifting the physiology, and you become adept at letting that power go into creating your conscious choice. When we're willing to do that, our power can create anything. What we focus on expands. So let's say we have those thoughts like, I'll never make it, or who do I think I am? This won't work for me. And then we believe that, we buy into it. What do I mean we buy into it? We turn it off. I'm not listening to that girl. She's crazy. Or I shouldn't follow my dream. I couldn't ever leave my job. It won't work out. So we like stay in the job. I'll just take more energy supplements, and we do this thing we hate. So that's an action. When we buy into the lie, we put our energy into that buy-in. We start obeying, or like, oh, he didn't text me back, so he must not love me. And we just like withdraw. I'll show him. So we do these games and it's the game that creates the shit that then people feel you, right? They're like, let me just avoid her. I'm not calling her, because they feel your lack of self-love or your attachment, and you're not going to be valued in your job because you don't own your own value. And so everything will be a reflection of what you buy into. It's not, though, the thought that's toxic. Like, the thoughts are just like radio frequencies. I could have a thought like, oh, I'm just a total screw up, I'll never make it, nothing I do will matter. But I don't have any energy vested in that thought. Like, I'm non-resistant. There's a space of, I love you, I love you, I love you, even if that does happen, right? So when I was sick, that was not where I was. I was so resistant to ever being a quote unquote loser, a quote unquote failure. I had really strong ideas about what that was. That's a judgment. I'm holding all this judgment, right? So your body feels it. My body felt it. I didn't feel unconditionally loved and accepted by myself. I felt like I better get myself together and achieve, because otherwise, and that's not real freedom. That's not real life. So to be fully alive, we've got to be in allowance of ourselves. And that allows all those thoughts to just move right through. You're not a receptor for them.
You mentioned the heart, and I saw a video that you did on the heart. You referenced the Heart Math Institute, is that right? Or
Yes.
So tell us about the heart from your point of view as a mind-body doctor, practitioner. We all know that it pumps, and it's so important to our health. But talk to us more about all the areas, the feeling part of the heart, and how that can affect us physically.
The heart is the most powerful electromagnetic center of the body. So I talked about, we can detect the electromagnetic field, the electromagnetic read, up to 10 feet away from the physical body. Well, when we do an electrocardiogram, you look at the EKG and the heart activity, it's not on the muscle of the heart. It's away from the actual heart. You're looking at the electrical activity through the heart. That's the signal, but it's way bigger than that. The potency of the electrical signal and the magnetic signal of the heart is actually sending an energy current that powerfully affects the brain, powerfully affects your nervous system, powerfully affects your immune system and your digestive system. So every organ, every cell is a part of that, is either receiving the potency of that electromagnetic transition, of that fluid, high vibrational state of, I love myself fully. It's okay to be fully alive. And so there's a cellular health, a vitality that is amplified, or the closure signal. Oh, I'm not enough. I'll never make it. I better just try harder. And it's like a dampening of that signal. So the first one is the concordant signal, and the second is discordant. And the physiologic impact of that has been shown that we either have this concordant harmony and like the blood pressure normalizes, our brain function improves, our digestion is better, or the opposite of that is happening with our inflammation and impaired physiology, and the adrenals are overrun, and you get the like adrenal fatigue syndrome, and the thyroid doesn't work. And it's not a physical phenomenon that's the primary problem. It's this electromagnetics. So it's really easy to shift the electromagnetics and begin to see healing happen sometimes right away.
So am I hearing that your one's attitude affects the rhythm of the heart?
Absolutely.
But is it in a way that can be seen on an EKG, obviously?
Yes.
And people then diagnose, oh, you have a heart problem, not realizing they have an emotional issue, maybe.
Okay. So yes, because on the gross level, meaning what the cardiologist is looking at, here's your heart rhythm, there will be changes where you can have more like irritability of the cardiac function. But what they're looking at in the Heart Math Institute is on a more micro level of your heart rate variability, your heart resilience. That can be seen on these readouts, but it's measured in a different way than just like looking at the gross print and saying, you're in a normal sinus rhythm. Oh, you're in atrial fibrillation. It's not the same methodologies of reading it that we're taught in Western medicine. It's a much more refined process to look at the resilience of the heart. But yes, it does show up in our physiology when we're in coherence.
So they've done studies, people who might be in love or people who might be depressed, and they can see a difference in the electromagnetic field of the heart.
There are so many amazing books on this. So Heart Math has tons of publication. Heartmathinstitute.org is where they'll have their research and data. Bruce Lipton, who's a cell biologist and was teaching in medical schools, has a huge body of work on this. And he's sharing, like you said, when you're in love, he wrote the book, The Biology of Belief, really about this. But he also wrote a book called The Honeymoon Effect, which is about how that state of being in love, which really is just about being receptive and in full acceptance of what is one of the most powerfully healthy and potent states that we can reside in.
I shared this on the podcast, that it was a long time ago, is that my mom, her ex-boyfriend and her oldest friend and another friend all died within like a 3-month period. And she started having heart pains, chest pains. And we took her to the urgent care, and God bless the doctor, because the doctor looked at her and said, you have a broken heart. And my mother left there feeling like she was radiant because someone had acknowledged her feelings. And I guess her body felt like it couldn't verbalize. She had to show it through her body. She's a British stiff upper lip woman. And, but she told that story like, my heart is broken. It really just took such a weight off her. And of course the pain went away. The physical heart pain went away because she'd been acknowledged and heard.
Yes, that's how healing happens. So what if for every ailment or pain or disease we're having, it's really just a cry for something in us to be seen, loved, acknowledged, and received? That's when healing happens. It doesn't need to keep sending out those distress signals and the stress signals and the discordant signals that create the physical disease. The physical disease is just the tip of the iceberg. It's the part we're seeing. It's a cry for help. It's, look, there's something happening at the core of my being that is discordant. And so if we just keep putting the Band-Aid on it, we're really not meeting the space within that being where healing can happen.
So someone with depression or anxiety, can you give us some ideas of what they can do to alleviate their symptoms? Or
yeah, it's really powerful because it's the same thing. In fact, I have a whole program called the Mind Body Solution for Anxiety and Depression. And we really treated this with an immense amount of compassion. And all of the speakers in it, including myself, have had those levels of severe anxiety and depression. So it's not like, let me give you some information. It's meeting it from that space of I see you. So we're usually in so much resistance to our emotions. And fear is it's almost universal that we just suppress it and suppress it and suppress it and keep doing the thing without really listening to the body. And so that's a lot of where anxiety comes from. And then the judgment and the repression of our inner state or the fear of our emotions eventually leads to depression. That's why anxiety and depression are so linked. So when we are willing, and you have to do this through great courage and great compassion, which is why in the program we hold the space with you. It's not like just, we're doing the exercises. It's a home study program, but you are very accompanied in the journey. You're meeting those deep, deep spaces of pain, of loneliness, of abandonment, of judgment that you don't even realize you've internalized, that have created that level of suppression. So you can let your system open up and just let all those energies and emotions release. Emotions are energy in motion, and the energy wants to move. We just sometimes are so afraid of that we don't let it happen.
So are you saying that you believe that depression and anxiety are emotions that are unacknowledged? And
a major part of what creates the depression, because we're taking all those emotions and we're shoving them down. And then there's like numbness at best and massive amounts of despair at worst, because the energy wants to move, it wants to go somewhere. And so little things will trigger us. And then that energy comes back out. We can't really suppress it. And anxiety especially is when we've gone into patterns in our nervous system that are not sustainable. So it's an erratic, a hyper amount of energy trying to be held in this system.
And what about with someone who, okay, just want to make sure that I answered like if someone had depression or anxiety, sounds like you have a course that helps them look at their pain so they can move it through.
And it helps them hold a space of so much compassion and courage that lets everything begin to transmute. So you're not working on it. You're not working on the problem or processing it. Or, that's a different thing. Where the real
that would be sympathetic using this. Is that because that would be sort of I'm going to white knuckle it through?
Yeah, that can be re-traumatizing. And then it's like, well, you got this thing, there's something wrong with you. I've had people tell me, well, my PTSD, it's like, who's the one with PTSD, right? It's the persona. It's like a meshwork in the system that you're identifying as. It doesn't have to keep replaying in this system. So we help you hold a space so that there's a release of those energies, of those neurologic patterns, and a rewrite into a state of health and vitality.
Do you have like 3 things someone with an autoimmune disease can start right now to do to prevent flare-ups or maybe even heal completely?
100%. So one is definitely the mind-body solution for chronic fatigue and illness, where we created this system that brings you to identify and become aware of, like, where am I holding this stuff that's making me sick? And go into processes that allow all of that to release. Like I said, if you're holding something, all you do is relax your hand and you let it go. And letting go is not the same as like this active, like, where do I get it? It's more of an undoing. So that's one really powerful process that I've put together, specific exercises and tools. The instant elevation is, if you're just gonna, and that's on my YouTube channel, the tool where you're beginning to bring your power back. And because what you focus on expands, your power is either going into the cycle, creating the disease. So as soon as you bring it back, it's not doing that. So that's the first piece, is just like, stop creating that cycle of the inflammation. And then the second pieces are to actually allow a restoration. And so opening the body, soft body, full breath. That's the second part. So, we go deeper into that in the coursework, but we all have access to the healing potential. Are we opening to it, or are we closing?
And what about someone with pain, physical pain? Do we?
It's a similar process. Like I said, no matter how it's showing up, the antidote is the same. But we did create the Mind Body Solution for pain as its own standalone program. Because usually they'll find my work. They love, oh my gosh, I'm already getting results. And they want to practice this fully and really integrate this. So I do work with people live in the Embracing Health program, which we start every June. But we also have home study courses people can start with on their own to really strengthen this. So it doesn't, they're all very similar, but they're geared around a different theme. They're set up a slightly different way. Pain is stuck energy that energy wants to move, and it's being suppressed, and this tension, so the energy can't flow. So whether it's grief or shame or anger or fear, that creates closure and tension patterns in the body, and then they're unconscious. Like, I don't know why I'm holding so much tension. I'm okay. You're not consciously aware of all that fear that's constantly being suppressed or managed. So when we begin to allow and invite that expansion, we let the energy move. And pain you do not need to live in chronic pain. Even if you've had it for 20 years, I've seen people heal and resolve from fibromyalgia, reflex sympathetic dystrophy, very severe neuropathy and neurologic pain syndromes that, you'll be told in the medical field, you're going to have this for life. There's nothing we can do. No, I have seen, there was a child I worked with last year with very, very severe RSD. She was seen by multiple major reflex sympathetic dystrophy. It's like a reflex loop where the nervous system gets fired up. Maybe you've had an injury. Sometimes it's usually a very minor injury, and then you have this like wicked intense pain. Like, why isn't this injury getting better? And it's like screaming. And I've actually worked with a lot of kids with this. One was a runner, her mom was taking her every week to physical therapy and the orthopedist, and they couldn't do anything. Nothing was helping, and it was worsening. And she resolved after one session of working together. But the other kid in Boston saw like every major expert of pediatric neurology, orthopedics, physical therapy, everything you could imagine. And we had one session, and she unwound the whole pain syndrome. She hadn't been able to go upstairs, so she was sleeping in the living room. Her mom was washing her hair in the living room. She couldn't go to school anymore for like 2 months. She had to do her homework at home. She had to be picked up off the floor by the ambulance because she tried to go to the bathroom on her own and couldn't get up. So the screaming, obviously there was a lot of emotion involved, but they couldn't figure out what to do with this kid. And once we assisted her in releasing the energy, and a lot of it was emotions, mental, and it doesn't mean it's all in your head. This was a very physical thing. She had inflammation. She had a huge amount of swelling, because people say like, well, it's not in my head. This is real. It's in my body. Yes, the mind makes it real. Your mind is networked throughout your entire system. It is triggering your nervous system. It is triggering your musculoskeletal system. It is triggering your immune system. Even the vascular system is affected by this. So it's all connected and communicating. So it is such a gift to see so much amazing healing happen. And I didn't heal her. We just opened and created the circumstances that would allow the healing to come through. And she was ready. She was a freaking courageous girl. And she was ready to open. And she let so much release that had been held in that body. And that's why the healing happened.
Can you be a little more specific? Because I have no idea what you mean.
Yeah. So one thing, for example, I asked her was if this were serving you in some way, and she was very receptive. So this is not where you would start with every kid. If this were serving you in some way, because I explained, hey, your subconscious system is actually trying to take care of you. It might be going about it in a way that's not so functional, but maybe there's some things you've been doing that have made it impossible for it to do it otherwise. And here it's trying to do this. What might it be serving if this were serving a purpose? And she immediately told me, well, I've hated school. I do not want to go. And wow, now I don't have to go to school. She was being bullied. There was a lot of stuff happening there. And she listed like 3 or 4 things. And I really had this feeling like there's one more, and keep asking. And I could tell there was like this big nugget. And I said, what else? If there was something else, what else might be there? And she said, well, my sister isn't mean to me anymore. And I could feel this huge release of emotion in her body. And I said, what was happening there? And so her older sister was kind of giving her tough love. Like, she would give her a hard time. And it wasn't that she was a bully, abusive sister. It was just, she wouldn't get the ball and she'd be like, come on, get the ball. But this child was so sensitive and felt like, oh my God, in front of all of her friends, I feel like a total loser. In front of all her friends, I feel like a piece of crap. And I think the older sister was just like, toughening her up, come on, and maybe almost thought it was encouraging, but to this kid it was very detrimental, and she didn't know how to express that, so she kept trying to toughen up and she kept trying to close down on her sensitivity. And that's where the whole thing unwound, was like, you're trying to be less of a sensitive person, but her sensitivity was actually her gift. She was incredibly powerful, empathic being. And so when she released the trauma of that and realized, how can I be different in my relationship with her sister? Because she never let her sister see that it bothered her or hurt her. I said, have you ever told your sister how that made you feel? And she just started crying and crying and crying. And I said, do you think your sister would be receptive? Do you think that she wants to make you feel like that? And she said, no, I don't. And so we just practiced it in that moment. It makes me feel so bad and so inadequate. And so there were specific words that will like open it. It makes me feel inferior. And as soon as she said that, you could feel the energy release. I feel so inadequate and inferior. And so now her body's not holding that anymore. and she felt better and she felt lighter. So we did some EFT tapping. We did some other mind body tools, which really just helps kind of ground in the new energy. And that very night, she made it up the stairs and slept in her own bed for the first time in months. And this little girl, who's like a little mermaid water girl, took a bath, hadn't been able to take a bath, and the next morning was able to go outside. So it was like a miraculous recovery and shift, because she was able to acknowledge those emotions and allow them to receive the light and the love. And it's okay to let this be seen.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that amazing work that you did with her. And thank you for being more specific, because it really gives us more of an idea of how our emotional selves can affect our physical selves. I love that you ask, how does this serve you? And it wasn't a blamey way, but because I believe that we humans never act, creatures never self-sabotage. We're always trying to survive. Sometimes we pick ways that don't work anymore. Yeah. They worked a little bit, but then they had, as you show us with this example, consequences that were, far beyond and not helpful.
Yeah, she was trying to do the best she could to protect herself and be a tough girl. And she didn't realize how detrimental it was in her system to suppress her feelings and not let it be seen that she was hurting. But you know what? At 11 years old, how awesome is it she's learning that now versus 39 years old, or like a marriage and 3 kids later? Like, I just suppressed my feelings. Sometimes it's a hard challenge to go through. I mean, often it really is, but the value is there, whatever age we are, that if we can get the learning, we can let go of the hardship. We can let go of the pain.
Well, so how can people find you or learn more about your work if they want to let go of their own pain?
So I'm at drkimd.com. The book is at drkimd.com/book. And you can get the ebook version with some videos that help you through it. And you can also get it on Amazon. We also have the online courses, which are at drkimd.com in the online course section. And I am live every Wednesday in the Mind Body community in Facebook and on my YouTube channel, Dr. Kim Duramo, where people can ask questions and view the Mind Body TV broadcast each week.
Excellent. So that's the Mind Body Toolkit book, by the way, folks. And thank you so much, Dr. Duramo, for being on the show today. You've really just what a mind-opening, heart-opening conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Lots of love to everyone tuning in.